Everybody has joined who's going to join. So I'll run through the roll call. And if I miss anybody or somebody comes in later, just let me know. But we definitely do have a quorum today for our important vote. So from Amherst, Natasha Kipfer. Brookline, I do not see anybody as of yet. Hollis, Joan Cudworth. Hudson, Caleb Chang. Litchfield, Jay, I presume that you're representing Litchfield today. Lineborough, Mark Chamberlain. Mason, Cassie Mullen. Merrimack, Don Tamala's here. I don't see anybody yet from Milford. Mount Vernon, nobody's here. Nashua, Julie Chismus. Matt Sullivan. Anybody else sneak in from Nashua? Pelham, Jeff Gowan, Jen Beauregard. Wilton, Peter Howd. NTS, Camille Pattison and John Savage. NHDOT, William Rose. NHDES, Tim White. Federal Highway, Lee Levine. And myself, Matt, Derek from NRPC. Anybody else? Pardon?
Don't forget Mason and Cassie.
Cassie is being credited to represent Mason today.
Okay.
So yes. Okay, great. So we'll take up the minutes of our January 13th meeting. I did receive a note that from Mark Chamberlain that the DES report, we should add the program name, which we believe is Clean Diesel. Is that correct, Tim?
That should do it, Greg. Yep.
Okay. Any other errors or omissions to the minutes? Okay, any abstentions or anybody will vote not to approve the minutes as amended?
Peter Howd will be abstaining.
Okay.
And William with DOT will also be an abstention.
Okay. So with those abstentions, we'll consider the minutes to be approved. Okay, so we'll take up the next item, which is the draft FY 21 to 24 Transportation Improvement Program and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update that we do in conjunction with each TIP. So I'll start with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, since it really is essentially the master plan for transportation planning for our region. It's a policy level document that's designed to guide transportation investment in the region for a 20-year planning horizon. It does include the complete list of regional projects which have either state or federal funding. And major updates are done every 4 years, which include a revisitation of the goals, the update of various performance measures, analysis of future travel demand and impacts on the transportation network, and a recommended list of projects to meet future travel needs, and a financial plan to ensure adequate resources are available for plan implementation. So our last major update was done in December of 2018. So our next one that will be due will be at the end of 2022. But whenever we update the TIP on our 2-year schedule, at that time, we do a MTP minor update. So this has really a couple of components. We update the project list and do revised cost estimates first. That's the first component. So we organize the project list into 3 categories: the state of New Hampshire 10-year plan projects that are scheduled for implementation through 2030, and then another Nashua MPO recommended fiscally constrained project list that runs through the analysis period of 2045, and we'll explain what fiscal constraint means for a project list. And then the third category are what we call illustrative projects They're not fiscally constrained. There may not be resources. There probably won't be resources in the time frame to implement them, but they are considered to be regional priorities. And then the other component of the minor update is the revised fiscal constraint analysis. And what we have done that is new in this particular update is to add a transit fiscal constraint analysis and the operations and maintenance needs of the transit system, which was done in coordination with Nashua Transit Service. And this was added per the corrective action of our October 2019 federal MPO certification review. So you, everybody hopefully has looked over the project list for the MTP, and I'll just go over what's new this time around. So first, we added the Cmac projects from 2019. This updates the 2018 project list. So Nashua, we have the downtown circulation and capacity improvements. In Milford, there was a 101A and Penema Hill Road sidewalk improvements. And also in Milford, sidewalks and bike lanes on Osgood, Melendi, and Armory roads. The second category are projects that are proposed for the FY 2023 to 2032 10-year plan. And these are included in the MPO fiscally constrained project list as they are not in the current TYP. They're in the next proposed TYP. So, and we'll be talking about these a little bit later, but the list is the NTS bus shelters and other improvements in Merrimack, the replacement of pedestrian bridge over the Salhegan River, Wilton, a pedestrian bridge spanning Stony Brook, Brookline improvements to New Hampshire 13 and Mason Road intersection, and also Brookline reconstruction of the New Hampshire 13 Ruinola Road intersection. And we have a regional project that we've proposed for state highway and traffic signal improvements. There's one other TYP project, Nashua Bridge and Canal Streets. This was previously in the 2018 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, so that doesn't result in a new project as the project cost revision. So under the category of added MTP project priorities, which have not yet been submitted for the 10-year plan inclusion, we have the Salhegan Valley Rail Trail, and we have a South Nashua commuter rail station. Now, I would also mention that there's an augmented work scope and funding for the New Hampshire 101 Wilton to Bedford improvements, as was discussed several months ago by the New Hampshire DOT project manager. So those components have been included in the MTP update. And we're now in the process of the receiving the TAP project applications. Letters of intent have been received, and these projects will be added as MPO priorities once the applications are submitted and the cost estimates are somewhat finalized. So any questions about the project list itself? Be happy to entertain any questions on that, but these are the changes that have occurred since the last major MTP update. Okay, so I'll talk about fiscal constraints now, and let me just bring that up here. So, okay, so hopefully now you're seeing the table that provides the fiscal constraint analysis for the Nashua MPO recommended highway projects. So it's really divided into three color-coded sections here. The first is the 21 to 24 tip period, and then the next 6 years takes us through the remainder of the 2030 10-year plan. So for this period, we're stating that the MTP is fiscally constrained for the NHDOT process, because they've carefully gone through their project listings and their resources that they have available for each category. And so they do conduct that fiscal constraint. We don't program any non-TYB projects during this time frame that would utilize federal state funds. So when we develop our cumulative balance, we're just zeroing it out through 2030. So beginning in 2031, we have a theoretical allocation that is equal to 12.35% of federal resources statewide. And this is calculated based on a formula agreed to by the state and MPO's 50% population and 50% lane miles. So we have estimates of the federal resources that will be available each year. And then we have a certain amount that goes for statewide programmatics. And these include things such as the bridge programs, the Cmac, paving, etc. So these are subtracted from the total federal dollars available that would tell us how much would be available for projects throughout the region. So we apply a factor to get our share of the statewide total, and that is in column under the NRPC statewide share. So the NRPC project federal dollars is subtracted from the theoretical share for projects to determine the balance. And we can have, actually I'm moving ahead here. So we have a regional project share that is determined by taking out the statewide share from the total available. And then we develop our project list and then take out that amount to produce a yearly fiscal year balance. So we want to make sure that as we move through the years in the future, that the cumulative balance stays positive. For any given year, we can have a negative balance, although it's not likely once you get beyond the 10-year program that for any particular year, you'd be showing a negative number in that column. But we want to ensure that the projects, actually we do have one down here in 2034, we have negative 6.5 million approximately. So, but throughout the years through 2045, we maintain a positive cumulative balance, and ultimately it comes out to about $34 million, which seems like a large sum, but really that only represents about 10% of NRPC's regional allocation for the 2031 to 2045 period. And you could consider something such as funding the Hudson Boulevard from federal funds, which is not a fiscally constrained project that would actually utilize much more than that remaining balance. And we know that over the years, we do get a biennial allocation that will be applied to projects. So it's highly unlikely that when we do get to the year 2045, we will be looking at that kind of a balance. It's just that it's not spoken for at this time. So I think most of the MPOs are following this process for conducting the fiscal constraint of highways. In the next table, I'm providing a list of non-federal revenues. So this is not strictly a component of fiscal constraint, since there really is no set allocation for these sources. So we've made some assumptions on what the numbers would be, and that it's going to vary as we go forward. But the Turnpike share is based on the NRPC region portion of the Turnpike system. Then other state funds are estimated in the future from the average for the 10-year plan period. And then town funds are based on what has been expended for the TIP through the 2021 to 2024 period. So this is a table we haven't shown in the past. Some of the MPOs actually combine this with the federal fiscal constraint table. I prefer not to do it. I think it adds too many columns and doesn't allow you to follow the constraint quite as well. So consider this an information only table. It's not a required table. The next one is for highway operations and maintenance needs. This is a required table in the MTP. So This shows all statewide O&M federal highway dollars, which would include state aid, bridge, betterment, in addition to the federal revenues. And it's estimated from the FY 2019 to 2022 STIP and the Turnpike renewal and rehab from the TYP, and assumes 1% growth going forward. So the NRPC allocations for federal aid highways and turnpikes are calculated that produce total O&M revenues available. The statewide O&M cost per mile is based on the total federal aid highway mileage to the overall resources, and this comes out to $20,500 per mile. The NRPC O&M needs are based on applying that figure of 20,500 to 759 miles in the region. And so that results in the last column, the amount that would actually have to be applied through other local sources. In the first year, 2021, we don't have a deficit, so that no additional resources would be required. Is there a question? Okay, so that really is it for the MTP. So moving on to the Transportation Improvement Program. So this is a list of all the federally funded transportation projects and programs in the Nashua region for the next 4 years, as well as non-federally funded projects that are considered regionally significant. And regionally significant projects are those that have a major impact upon regional travel flows through new roadway construction, substantial widening, or implementation of significant transit expansions. So the TIP does not include non-federal, non-regionally significant projects such as state aid bridge, turnpike paving, etc., TAP programs. Previously, we've included an information-only list in the TIP that does have these, but as these projects are all listed in the MTP, we just are not presenting that anymore. I think it just adds another layer of uncertainty. So if you want to look at the complete project listing, the MTP is really the place to go to, as the TIP itself is a rather specialized list of projects. So the TIP obviously must be consistent with the MTP. The programming is for a 4-year period. It's fiscally constrained. It includes a planning level air quality conformity determination and the system performance report. The MPO TIP is consistent with the state TIP or STIP, which itself is derived from the state 10-year plan. And this is a long-range state planning process that is not mandated by federal law. It is just how the state does their programming over the time frame that they're concerned with. So the TIP document itself starts out with a discussion of the TIP project programming, and this is the manner in which the TIP development is integrated into the state 10-year plan process. There's a complete description of that. The Nashua MPO does have sub-allocation authority over STBG funds for large urban areas, and since our biennial allocation from NHDOT exceeds this amount, it really has never been an issue, in the cycles that we've been undertaking this authority. The selection process for the 2021 to 2030 10-year plan projects is described. There have since been refinements to this process that are being implemented for the current 10-year plan update for 2023 to 2032. And you'll see the project rankings for the 21 to 30 projects on page 10. And then the status of the projects from the previous TIP is listed on page 11. We then move on to the air quality conformity. As was done the last round or two, a planning level determination only is required. There's no modeling required at the, for projects. So all that we need to show is that our planning assumptions are up to date. We maintain up to date population, employment stats. We have a regional travel model that is up to date, capable of doing modeling if this were to be required. We engage in monthly interagency consultation, and there are transportation control measures in the region that center on the statewide inspection program. Next is the financial analysis. And since we've already gone through the complete fiscal constraint process for the MTP, all that is necessary is to state that the tip tables are derived from the first 4 years of the MTP. Moving on, then we have the tip system performance. And here we have updates to the performance measures. First, we have incorporated a new performance measure, the Public Transit Agency Safety Performance Measure, which we discussed in the TTAC previously, and it's been recommended for MPO adoption, which will occur in conjunction with the TIP adoption this month. We also have the annual update to highway safety, which we also discussed. I've updated the TAM target per the new data provided by NTS. And we also have revisions to the speed data for travel time reliability, the PM3, but we're not changing the target at this time, just the underlying data. So the tables that identified projects, how they address these performance measures and the amounts, the resources that are associated occur on pages 33 to 38. And then the main guts of the TIP, the project listing, is provided in Appendix A. And we understand that there will be some modifications to some of the transit items. I was talking with Julie, so we'll be making those and transmitting that information to DOT. The one change here that you might notice is a column that shows the toll credit soft match amount. So what the toll credits do is allow complete funding with federal dollars where 20% match is required. So we are showing how those apply to each phase of projects. And then in Appendix B, we have the financial data, which include the NRPC Fiscal Constraint Summary, the aggregation of expenditures by project phase and percent federal funding source, and then the New Hampshire DOT Fiscal Constraint Summary. And that's pretty much the story on the TIP. So I would be happy to entertain any questions on that. Everybody's happy with the TIP, I guess. Okay, so we are looking for a motion to recommend the adoption of the TIP and the MTP update. And that motion would include the incorporation of any needed changes to project costs or any other minor changes that come up through the public comment period, which runs another 2 weeks.
So moved, Jeff Gowan Pelham, although I won't try to articulate that entire motion again.
Okay. And a second.
Mark Chamberlain from Lembro. I'll second that.
Okay. So we'll run through the list of towns, each town, one town, one vote. Amherst, yay or nay?
Yes.
Brookline, I believe, is not present. Hollis,
Yes.
Hudson,
Yes.
Litchfield,
Yes.
Lineborough,
Yes.
Mason,
Yes.
Merrimack,
Yes.
Milford is not present. Mount Vernon is not present. Nashua,
You guys good with me speaking for Nashua? Yes.
Unacceptable. Unacceptable. No, it's absolutely fine.
Nashua says yes, thank you.
and we promise to make the changes. Pelham,
Yes.
Wilton,
Yes.
NTS,
Yes.
NHDOT,
Yes.
NHDES,
Yes.
NRPC, yes, it carries unanimously. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the 10-year plan project update. So summary of the NHDOT engineering review of project submissions was sent out this morning. We had our discussion with them on Friday. Excellent discussion as always to review the project list and get a better insight into what is looked at and how it impacts the costs. So already had some feedback, and I think we're just at the beginning of where we'll be discussing these projects. So let me just run through the highlights and the costs and the differences from what had been submitted versus what came back. So the priority one project was the Bridge and Canal Streets, Complete Streets in Nashua. This is to implement improvements along Canal Street from Railroad Square, continuing east over the Canal Street Bridge, continuing towards the Veterans Memorial Bridge for 4,800 linear feet involving pavement replacement, curbing, sidewalks, drainage, etc. So the cost estimate that came back was actually 38% higher than the year of expenditure that had been originally estimated by the city. So the review comments, the highlights, they note that traffic control would involve phase construction work, and this would result alternating one-way traffic during the off-peak hours. I think this is certainly something that's to be expected. It assumes sidewalk reconstruction for the full length of the project. It assumes that the work will stay within right-of-way limits and no widening will occur, and that I believe is what the city had intended. The federal funds will be capped to the amount that they state, and if necessary, adjusting the project scope to stay within this funding amount would be done. And they note that the city seems to not have well defined the eastern limits of the project, and so they may have had this in mind.
Hey, Greg, is there a project list that we could put up that we could share?
Okay. Well, yeah, let me just get the table up then.
Or the DOT comments, a visual would just be helpful.
Yeah, I think we want to get the table up. Actually, okay. Okay, so this is the table that illustrates the updated cost. So the aggregate of all projects comes to 8.9 million versus our regional allocation of 6.176 million for the 2-year period that gets tacked on to the end of the 10-year plan project period that we're working in now. So most construction of these projects would be in 2032. So this particular project had been estimated at 1.36 million federal in the construction year, and the project is up to 1.88 million. So I'll just open that one up for comment or questions of DOT. So feel free, to just ask any questions. I don't think, William would be necessarily answering them today, but all questions will be answered. Okay, moving on then to project number 2, the NTS bus shelters. So this one, they're going with the amount that Nashua had applied for, federal expenditures of $445,600. They're asking that there be a comprehensive review of bus shelter needs that will take place. So there'll be a prioritization process for any of these shelters or other improvements. So, we'd be happy to work with NTS on that process. Otherwise, looks like a very straightforward project. Okay, number 3, pedestrian bridge replacements in Merrimack. So this one, again, they're not changing the cost amount from what Merrimack had intended, but we have some other issues here. So this involves replacing the existing pedestrian bridge superstructure over the Souhegan River. In their comments, they note that'd be more appropriate as a transportation alternative program. They assume that the proposed bridge will use the same abutments. The bridge length and width will remain the same. However, they would not allow the new bridge, assuming it's prefabricated, to be launched from the F.E. Everett Turnpike. So I was contacted by Merrimack today, and I let DOT know of concern over this. So I just open up the discussion here.
Greg, this is Dawn, and I called earlier. The way this bridge was put in, I can't remember, somewhere around 2010, was they dropped it in from the F.E. Everett. And that's the way we're proposing to put it in, or take out the old one and then put in the new one. I don't know if this is the first I'd heard of it this morning in reading this. So I have a couple of concerns. One, can we possibly be able to meet with the committee and have this discussion? Because that's, to do it any other way would be cost prohibitive at this point. It connects our trail system. It is the life of our trails between the north and south. It comes over the Souhegan River. It connects the north and south part of this town through the trail system. And there's no road down to this area here. There's no way to get a bridge structure in, and to actually do that would be just cost prohibitive. But it's a main link. It's used all the time. It connects our high school with the residences to the south. It was used heavily until it was closed down earlier, or last year, springtime. And my other concern was doing the TAP application for it. We did submit another one at this point. Do we need since we already submitted one, we can't submit a second one, but can we change if we needed to? But I guess our main concern is we'd like to at least be able to sit down and talk this through.
Greg, did we have any sense, or maybe it's a question that William can answer, as to why, if this was the way it was installed in 2010, that it's no longer possible to install it from the turnpike?
Well, that's definitely a question for DOT.
Sure. So we didn't know for a fact that that's what the town was planning on doing, but had concerns that that might be the plan. I think the big change since the last time, the current bridge was dropped into place, is it was an old structure, and now we have a brand new, or nearly brand new, Merrill's Marauder Bridge, and we wouldn't even entertain doing something like this for one of our own projects, staging cranes on a new structure. So I understand you have concerns, and certainly we can get you in touch with somebody at the department to talk a little bit more about them. But in sharing our opinions and in reviewing these projects at a first take, that was a concern that came from the committee in this particular instance.
Oh, yes, I would like to be able to sit down with somebody and go over this. Would that be a committee meeting or whatnot? But
So William, would you like us to initiate that, or do you want to initiate the meeting?
Yeah, well, I guess my question is, would Nashua RPC like to be involved in that conversation?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll work something out and make sure that everybody gets looped in.
Thank you.
so the second part of that question is, I mean, if we have to change our projects, is that allowed under the TAP?
I don't, I'll admit I'm not.
You don't have to change it to TAP. They suggested for several projects that, you know, it's more of a TAP project, or in one of them, it's more of a Cmac project. We have 7 TAP applications, so we have definitely room under the 10-year plan budget allocation. It's going to be highly competitive in TAP, you know, with all the projects. So I would leave it right here.
We'd like to leave it right here. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, as far as TAP, you know, we're guaranteed getting one project, but that may be the only project we get, or we may get a second. But that still doesn't make everybody happy. Okay, so moving on then, our next priority project is the pedestrian bridge in Wilton. We'll be spanning the Stony Brook and completing the Riverwalk Loop on the western section of town. The DOT assumes 100-foot long and 9-foot wide pedestrian bridge. They are unclear as to whether the town has acquired easements and property rights. It appears that the bridge begins and ends on private property, meaning that the work will require right-of-way acquisition and easements and potentially a public hearing. And the project will also, a question whether will the project also include construction of a new sidewalk on Forest Road or mid-blocking crosswalk to get to the other side where there is a sidewalk. And they note this project also would be better suited as a TAP project, and the town is submitting this one as well under the TAP program. So here, again, the cost estimate is 38% higher than was submitted by the town. So that's something for Wilton to be aware of. They're now looking at $728,480 federal dollars from the total cost of 910. So that raises the local share as well. Okay, next up, we have a regional traffic signal project. And how this evolved was when we went through the process, we found that we were underspent by $1,927,000 of our federal allocation. So we know that there's certainly a need for improved signals along the state highway system in the region. Those would be eligible for this money. And so we proposed to utilize what appeared to be the balance available at that time for a project that would include signal coordination, adaptive signal controls possibly, and flashing yellow signal arrows, which would replicate the Cmac project from the state from the last round. And we did some analysis of that at several locations in our region. So the 1.9 million was not really a cost estimate based on a set number of intersections that we looked at, but we're looking at, using whatever balance is determined to be available after we go through the entire process would be available for upgrading signals in the region. So that's how that number came about originally. So the DOT notes that this may be better suited to a Cmac program project and assumes 35 intersections could be completed with this amount. So obviously this will be changing based on the updates of all project costs. Next one is Brooklite, improvements to New Hampshire 13 and Mason Road intersection. So this project would raise the level of the road's approach, Mason Road's approach to the intersection, and pave it in order to improve the line of sight at that intersection. So the DOT estimate assumes that the work can be completed as easily as stated. They were unclear how much of an elevation increase is required. If 200 feet of approach work is all that's required, the elevation adjustment is minor. They note that the guardrail within the project limits will also need to be adjusted. So this caught my attention because the guardrail that had been installed at some point in the recent past was cited as a major reason for the problem of sightline distance occurring. I've looked at it on Google Maps. To me, it looks like the line of trees there is a major impediment to viewing traffic coming southbound on New Hampshire 13. But people are saying it's the guardrail. So if it was the guardrail that was put in that caused the problem, and part of the solution is to adjust the guardrail now, then it raises the question, at least in my mind, is this just a guardrail reconstruction project? Anyway, the DOT also noticed that sidewalk would need to be reconstructed, and they're looking at a cost in the present dollars of 1.5 million, which would increase to 2.11 million, which would be 100% federal funding as it's a state highway. But the original estimate was for 145,000. So, this is like a 14.5 times increase in the original estimate. So all I can say is it creates, a major issue for discussion in this process.
And Greg, I don't see Tad or anybody from Brookline on the call, but I did have a chance to connect with him, and he does feel that it would be prudent to pull the project at this point and perhaps resubmit it in the next round.
Okay, so we could pull the project and then relook at the balance that would be available for the regional signals. And I think that came out to about 1.3 million then would be available. So we will rework the table. And the final project, also in Brookline, was for reconstruction of Route 13 with Ruinola Road. And their comments included If you relocate Ruinola Road, you would need to relocate Millbrook Road. It may be possible to have the same benefits from a project that adds shoulder width to create a wider shoulder for right turning traffic. They noted that Melendi Road is an alternate route to eliminate right turn movement. Grades are an issue. Ruinola increases in grade away from this intersection, and making the intersection a 90-degree angle will relocate the intersection north. And they also believe that will likely require right-of-way acquisition in a public hearing. But fortunately, their estimate stays with the original estimate that was submitted. And then finally, the last item is just a carryover of $367,000 that would be needed for Kinsley Street sidewalks in the future. No, I had amended. I brought up the table. I hadn't corrected yet. So it's actually the federal dollars would be $293,000 for this project. So that modifies the total slightly. So we're still over the allocation, even if we bump out the well, we would be over in terms of what we had submitted for our regional project. So if we scale that one back, and I think it's going to be to the 1.3 million range, then that would bring us back to our allocation. So that's where we are. We just had to sit down with DOT on Friday, so everything is evolving, but seems like we may be moving towards some consensus, except with our Merrimack problem here. So hopefully we can get things resolved to everybody's satisfaction.
I just want to comment that I think it's really striking that we really struggled to use our allocation. We have a number of projects in here that were noted as being perhaps more appropriate as TAP projects. And then when you look at the list of TAP projects that we have, obviously that program, we can't possibly meet those needs. And so again, it's a longer policy issue, or a longer term policy issue that we have to consider, but it's pretty striking. Clearly the primary demand in our region at this point is for a transportation alternative types of projects, not traditional highway projects, and the funding that we have available just doesn't seem to align well with the priorities that we seem to have.
Well, it's just been a crazy year, I guess. That's what happened. But all I can say is that my recommendation is that if you have a project and the TYP process precedes TAP, then really consider submitting it there first. And then if you can get it under TAP later, then do so. But, it's once you've gone through the two processes, then you can't go back and easily and add it to the TYP. You get it implemented much quicker under TAP, but it's much more highly competitive as we see. So that would be my recommendation. Hopefully, we'll have a ton of local projects next time around for the TYP, so that we're not scrambling to later on. Okay, so that's it. So we're kind of transitions us into a discussion of the TAP projects. We just received the letters of intent, so Matt's going to review what we have here so far. I hear him talk in the next room, but I think he's muted.
Sorry. So Greg, you can see the TAP funding update?
Yeah. Okay.
So we did start talking about this last time. You all know it's this program is for pedestrian, bike, non-motorized infrastructure projects, up to 80% federal funding for each project. This round is for 2 years of funding. And there's $5.2 million federal, statewide, and letters of interest were due last Friday, February 1st or February 5th. Hold on. And so 7 letters of interest from this region were submitted. That add up to $4.68 million. So this is the list. I'll go through them. This is alphabetical. So Amherst, there's the Amherst Pedestrian Bikeway. This is an initiative to create 2 multimodal districts in town with enhanced bike ped facilities and a multi-use path to connect them. The federal request is $768,000, local match 190 would be 20%, 192,000. And hold on here. So for a total of $960,000 for that project. In Hollis, the proposed project is crosswalk upgrades at 4 intersections, including as yet undefined pedestrian crossing light systems. The ask is $320,000 federal, $80,000 would be the local match, total project cost of $400,000. Next project is in Litchfield, and the proposal is to extend existing the sidewalk on Pinecrest Road to connect with Albuquerque Avenue. The ask for federal funding is just shy of $420,000, about $105,000 local match, and around $525,000 total project cost. Request from Merrimack is paved sidewalk on DW Highway between Chamberlain Bridge, which is right near that firehouse, that big curve over the bridge there, and it would extend south to the plaza at 360 DW Highway. The ask is $1 million federal, and the local match would be $250,000 for a total project cost of $1.25 million. Next is in Nashua. The proposal is for West Hollis Street bike route that would connect Mine Falls Park to Southwest Park and Nashua River Rail Trail. The federal portion of that would be $800,000. The local match would be $200,000, and the proposed total cost of that project is $1 million. The proposal from Pelham is to extend sidewalks on Old Bridge Street and install a pedestrian bridge over Beaver Brook. Just shy of $773,000 federal, $193,000 would be the local match. Total project cost of $966,000. And the last project is in Wilton, and that's would be the Stony Brook Riverwalk Bridge spanning Stony Brook from Wilton Police Station parking lot to a lot on 7 Burns Hill Road. And the ask is $600,000 federal. The match locally would be $150,000. Total project cost is $750,000. And that was the information in the letter of intent, and that is the project we just talked about that was also proposed for the 10-year plan. Again, $4.68 million is the regional total. And as I showed on the previous slide, the total available is for the state is $5.2 million. So next steps, and these are still to be determined. So there will be an attendance at a mandatory pre-application informational meeting, date, time to be determined. Submission of the TAP application, that deadline is still to be determined. We will, NRPC will score and rank these projects. And you give based on the previous round that typically happens September to October. The rankings then are submitted to DOT. Again, previous round was November. And then final approval, again, last time around was January. So, those are all to be determined. As far as scoring and ranking, again, it's an assumption, but the assumption is we'd use the same criteria as the previous round. And we would probably enlist a couple of you from non-participating towns to be part of that scoring process. So that's what I have for that. Any questions?
So this is Jay, question for William. I had a sense that the schedule was going to be more aggressive this year. Am I right in thinking that, or is what Matt is laying out reasonably accurate?
I think what Matt's laying out is reasonably accurate for now. Part of what's going on is the letters of interest were solicited first so that the program can be more targeted as far as planning and communication. And now that we got those letters in on Friday, I would expect that you're going to start to see and hear a lot about next steps pretty quickly. And we'll know how aggressive and how quick once that happens.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may. Given kind of building on what Jay just spoke about previously with the obvious need for funding for bike ped projects or non-motorized projects, Jay, I'm wondering if I understand the RPCs are meeting with Congressman Pappas tomorrow, and I'm wondering if this will be part of the discussion. I know he's a big act. I know he doesn't necessarily represent Nashua, most of our region, but at the same time, he is on the infrastructure committee, and I'm wondering how much of your conversation will be around that.
That's actually high on my list, and I plan to bring our project list along because I think probably the point that jumps out to me the most is what 4,680,000 from our region compared to 5.2 available statewide. That's pretty striking. We're one region, so absolutely, I think that's going to be a central part of that conversation.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the TAP program? Otherwise, we can move into our update section. Matt, I don't know, were you going to talk about the minor revision at all?
Just that we had some, they're all in Nashua. I did communicate with Nashua. We have them, I think, all straightened out. And so we're in good shape on those.
Okay, so I'll just mention them in terms of impact on the tip that we're now going through because, yeah, on the East Hollis Street project, there was slight increase in funds and PE for 22. Heritage Trail, they were moving construction funds from 21 to 22. And then on the transit project, the Walmart, that decreased the funds in 22. So, you know, there are minor changes, but actually if you're doing a tip, it's not just that it impacts, you know, the project listings, which can easily be updated, but if you're redoing fiscal constraint for these, then and you're also redoing appendices where projects are broken down by funding category. It's not just the Nashua projects, but there are also some statewide programs and we include those in the tip and the MTP. So to make these changes on the fly, you know, it's kind of throws a monkey wrench into it. The process, it would just redo a lot of work. So anyway, we've communicated with the DOT and Federal Highway seem to agree that, you know, all these changes could be incorporated into the next amendment. So that, you know, we're not having to rush through the public comment period, making the minor trivial changes that actually involve a substantial amount of work.
I have a question on that then, because that's going to affect one of our discretionary grants that we tried so hard to get in there.
Those we were going to do, but
through the update, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, because this minor moves money.
Stuff that we discussed before, we're going to get those because they were that, yeah. Those.
Well, but but one of the minors affects that discretionary, and it's moving money from 20 to 21. So we kind of need to make sure that happens in April as well as part of the update. I don't think we can wait for an amendment for that.
All right, we'll get it in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If
Hey,
the-
Greg, I just want to add one thing. Thanks to Nashua for turning around that minor really quickly. I normally give you a couple weeks on that, and this time I didn't, shall we say. So thank you to Nashua, and I was dealing, as it turns out, directly with Julie, so thank you.
Also,
Thank you.
One of the comments I'm going to be submitting to you, Greg, I guess it's probably more for DOT, but since we communicate these matters through you guys, it doesn't look like the draft STIP that is posted for public comment includes those additional discretionary funds that were to be added through the STIP update. So I just want to make sure that we don't have to wait for an amendment for those. We are actively waiting on this to happen. We have a van that we are eagerly awaiting to order. And those were the 5339 B and C projects.
Yeah, those was my understanding. Those were going to be changed because we had updated our tip for
Yep.
those projects, and so it would be incumbent upon them to update the STIP. And I think all of that was in the process. So
Okay, thank you.
the newer stuff was mainly the East Hollis Street,
Mhm.
the transit extension, and then these statewide programmatics that impact all the MTP stuff. So yeah,
Thank you.
but those, yes, we were making sure that we have in there. Okay, so any municipal updates that people want to let us know about today? Then I will move on to NHDOT.
The big things on our radar right now are things that we've already discussed today. We've got the TAP application round that's open. We've got the 10-year plan process that's started. We're well ahead of the game this time in getting comments back to the RPCs now before even March. And work behind the scenes is already underway in developing the draft of the 2023 to 2032 10-year plan. And then we have the STIP that's also in process.
And you have our draft UPWP for review.
We do.
Okay, great. So moving on then, New Hampshire DES.
Thanks, Greg. We sent out a notice Wednesday about the latest round of funding for our state clean diesel program. The proposals are going to be due 4 p.m. on Monday, March 8th. There's also a possibility for a couple of additional subsequent rounds of funding contingent on the availability of monies after this initial round. You can find a proposal form, a description of the scoring criteria, and some additional information about the program on the DES website. If you've got a project that you'd like to discuss specifically, you can get in touch with me, or you can get in touch with Jessica Wilcox from my office. So if you have a viable project that you'd like to discuss with us about potentially pursuing, yeah, just get in touch. So thanks, Greg.
Okay. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, Federal Highway.
Yeah, hi, Greg. Nothing really as far as an update goes. I mentioned last time I mentioned the stimulus funds and that we didn't really have any further information, and we still don't have any further information in terms of guidance. We're kind of waiting. We're hearing that we're going to get some guidance from the Office of the Secretary at some point, but we haven't really received much, or if anything, at this point in time. So that's about it. Nothing really to update anybody on as regards that or anything else at the moment.
Okay, hopefully we met all the corrective actions in our draft tip and MTP update. Okay, so I would entertain the motion to adjourn
This is Mark. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
in a second.
Julie, so moved.
And
Or
if
second,
there's
sorry.
no objections, I will say that we are adjourned. See you next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.